Righto, colonoscopy. A few weeks ago I talked about my upcoming colonoscopy, my 10th. That classifies me as a veteran, I believe. This is my first 5-year gap between them. And I found this one a little bit different to all of the others. Well, I guess the first one was different because you'd never had one before. But this one certainly was just different. I can't quite put my finger on why. So the first thing you've got to do in Australia is get a referral from your general practitioner, your doctor, to a surgeon. So we got that. And then you've got to go to the chemist and get your pharmacist-only medicine. So this is a good gear that cleans out your colon. Some interesting things in there like macrogol 3350, sodium sulfate, sodium chloride, which of course is salt, potassium chloride, which is another type of salt in sachet A, ascorbic acid, and sodium ascorbate acid, and sodium ascorbate in each sachet B. So you come home and you mix that up in a container, 2 lots of, shake it all up, and the advice is to refrigerate it. Well, I don't know, I just really struggled to get this stuff down. I haven't had trouble swallowing this stuff ever, but this particular one, number 10, I was almost gagging on the stuff. I don't know whether I didn't cool it down enough or whether I'd cooled it down too much. Probably next time I'll go room temperature, I think, which will be 2030, should I remain alive for that long. I guess I've been lucky enough to be at my 10th colonoscopy because I was found to have cancer at 49. A guy that I know that I would classify as a friend, surgeon in town, said we wouldn't have even been looking. So I was quite lucky that I went into my GP at that time. At age, I was actually 48 when I went in, and I told him I wanted to have a colonoscopy. Don't know if you can do these things anymore. He wrote the referral, and I left that for almost 12 months before I acted on it. So I was 49 or 49 a bit, and I still don't know what made me act on that because I had no symptoms. So anyway, it's not about symptoms. I'll tell the cancer story another day. So it's up to the hospital, and my wife is very worried about what I look like for some reason. I don't know why. She said, you can't wear jewellery. I said, yeah, I've had a few of these. So I take out my earrings, my nipple ring, and she said, what are you going to wear? I said, just a dirty old t-shirt and a dirty old pair of pants that won't matter if I lose. And I said, the oldest pair of thongs I've got. Well, she said, but you've got to come out. What are people going to think after it's done? I don't know. Do I need to care? Anyway, I don't get the what will people think bullshit. In we roll and do their paperwork there. Well, actually, most of the paperwork's done online now, which is great. Suits me, but it won't suit some. But there's always more paperwork, so we do some more paperwork when we get to the hospital. And then you go into the waiting room. Well, if you go into waiting room number 2, where you have they measure your height and they measure your weight, which I fail on most times. And then they take your blood pressure and they ask you some more questions. And they're particularly concerned about my blood pressure, but they're particularly concerned about my bottom blood pressure. I think it was 140. Anyway, they seemed rather shocked. And then it's back out to the waiting room with the warmed to, 60 degrees Celsius blanket. Not sure why that is, but there must be a reason. Must open up your veins or something, open up your arteries and veins. And then the next person comes around, they want you to sign the form that says, anaesthetics a danger, you could die. It doesn't actually say that, but I've christened it the death form for a while, so I got into trouble for calling it the death form in front of everybody. The lady nurse in charge turned around and said, don't you mention the word death in my waiting room. I said, well, that's what it's about. It's about death. It's coming to us all. And then you wait a little bit longer and you head into the surgery area. At this particular time, I ended up with a new doctor and a new anaesthetist, the 2 guys that used to do it. I knew they were getting close to retirement. The surgeon of the time, he was probably just doing colonoscopies into his 70s to make sure his bank account was ticking over by 10 or 15 grand a week. Good guy, but it's probably the only reason I'm alive. He owned a couple of cattle properties around the place, and he did tell me last time he was going to retire soon. The guy that was usually doing the anaesthetic, also someone just wanted to make sure 10 or 15 grand keeps kicking over into his bank account every week. He owned a couple of cattle properties in the west, and I assume he was also close to retirement at that time. This is all they were doing at the time was colonoscopies, just keep that bank account rolling over. But we'd obviously formed some form of relationship, and part of the issue I've always had with this gear, it doesn't seem to matter how much water I would drink, I'd end up with a headache. And I just mentioned that to the anaesthetist. I didn't this time, I did all the other times, and that hit me with something in the go to sleep stuff. Anyway, I mentioned to the new doctor that they were very concerned about my blood pressure, and he asked me what it was, and I told him, he said, it's no dramas, there's opinion versus opinion. And of course we get the job done, and you wake up out in the recovery room with the machine that goes bing, and this is obviously the best time to get your blood pressure. I don't know how many times they took it, but when I woke up I started watching it, and we were running at about 110 110 over 68, up into the 120s over 70s. So I summoned someone over and made sure they were writing that down. I've always had a bit of white coat fever doing the blood pressure thing, especially when they're talking to you. And anyway, so I was happy with that blood pressure. And then out into the waiting room. Apparently the doctor had already spoken to me, which is really odd because I don't remember it, so I must have been asleep, but must have answered him as well. So from there, we sat down and they brought us a big coffee and some sandwiches, and after half an hour or so they called my wife in, not allowed to drive for 24 hours. And I asked an older nurse, can you turn those TVs on? Wouldn't mind having a look at the stock market. Wow, did she burr? She said, I don't think the Lutheran board members would be happy with that. And I thought, well, it's not really even a Lutheran hospital. It's a, what's the word? Protestant-based operation. She said, you're not in any state to be making any decisions. I don't want to make a decision. I just want to see where things are at. And I never take my phone to things like that. I only ever take to the hospital what I think I can lose. We are clear. Of course, they send you home these days with a beautiful picture of your colon, which I won't post. That'd be a bit nasty. And it's hard to believe that that is almost a month ago. 1 month. Just to finish up on that, it's probably really, really important that you don't fear these things because it's such a small space in time, and even the consuming of the gear to clean you out these days is really compressed. My memory of the earlier colonoscopies were, it was pretty much over 2 days. Well, now I started drinking the first lot at 7 p.m. and then the second lot at 11 p.m. So she's not much sleep night, whereas before I think I would have been into it maybe 1 p.m. in the afternoon and then maybe 4 a.m. in the morning, something like that. So they've compressed all that up. But nobody should fear it. And one of the questions is, did you finish your prep? I thought, well, that's the goal, isn't it? I'd be dead without it, and that'd make some people happy. I obviously wasn't put on the earth to be popular, given the jobs I ended up doing. So there'd be a lot of people happy if I did or had ended up in the fire. By fire, I mean the furnace. I haven't had any bad reactions to colonoscopy. You do hear and see that there are things that do and can go wrong, and whether scanning for cancer is a good thing. In my case, I'm dead without it. The same with my mother. She had breast cancer in 1984, and she managed to live till 2024, so 40 years post what was horrific surgery, and that was found through scans. I am an argument for scanning for cancer, or scanning, whatever you want to call it. But colonoscopy, simple little operation. I don't know how long it takes, but it's not long. I did mean to take note of the time before I went out and when I woke up, but I think we had to be at the hospital at 6 o'clock. I was home by 11:15 and ready for a big old feed of fish and chips. Don't fear it, embrace it, because there's nothing really to fear.